Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at decision making.
Ooh, fun.
Yeah, and specifically we're going to be using Annie Duke's Thinking in Bets as our guide.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, so it's all about how to make better decisions by, well, thinking in bets.
Which most of us probably already do in some way or another without even realizing it.
That's right.
Yeah.
So one of the first things that Annie Duke kind of brings up in the book is this idea of resulting.
Ah, yes, resulting.
So what is resulting?
Well, it's this thing we do, like you were saying, probably without even realizing it, where we judge the quality of a decision only by how it turned out. Like, let's say you buy some stock, and then the market crashes, and that stock plummets.
Oh, yeah.
You might immediately think, oh, that was a terrible decision to buy that stock.
Right. Bad decision.
Right, but what if that crash was caused by something completely out of your control? Like a global pandemic or a war or something like that?
Yeah, you had no way of knowing that was going to happen.
Exactly. So does that mean the decision itself was actually bad?
I mean, I guess not. If you couldn't have known, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like Duke says we have to separate the quality of the decision from the outcome.
Okay, so a good decision can have a bad outcome, and a bad decision can have a good outcome.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah. And she gives this great example from the Super Bowl, like Pete Carroll's decision to pass on the last play.
Oh, yeah. Everyone remembers that one.
Right? It was widely criticized because it resulted in an interception, and the Seahawks lost the game.
Right, but would we have judged that play differently if the pass had been caught for a touchdown?
Right, exactly. We probably would have been praising Carroll for his bold decision-making.
Wow. It really makes you think about how much we focus on the outcome rather than the decision-making process itself.
Absolutely. And Duke argues that this is because our brains are kind of wired to crave certainty.
So we want to believe that we have control over things even when we don't.
Right. And connecting decisions to outcomes gives us that illusion of control.
It makes sense. Like if we can point to a specific decision that led to a positive outcome, we feel like we're in the driver's seat.
Exactly. But the problem is that life is full of uncertainty and chance events that are outside of our control.
So how do we break free from this trap of resulting and start making more objective decisions?
Well, one way is to recognize that life is more like poker than chess.
Okay, I like where this is going.
Yeah. So in chess, everything is visible. All the information is right there on the board.
Right.
The outcome is determined solely by skill. But life, like poker, is full of hidden information.
Oh, I see.
We're constantly making decisions with incomplete data, and luck always plays a role.
So you're saying we can't always know if a particular outcome was due to skill or chance?
Exactly. And that makes it even harder to avoid resulting.
Because if we don't know for sure why something happened, it's tempting to just assume that our decision was the main factor.
Right. And this is where things can get really tricky, because it can lead us to make bad decisions in the future based on faulty reasoning.
So how do we overcome this?
Well, one way is to embrace uncertainty.
That sounds kind of scary.
I know, right? Most people are uncomfortable with, I don't know. But Duke argues that it's essential for making good decisions.
So instead of clinging to the illusion of certainty, we need to become more comfortable with not knowing everything.
Exactly. Acknowledging that we don't have all the answers is the first step toward making more informed decisions.
Okay, but how do we actually do that in practice?
Well, one way is to start thinking in bets.
Thinking in bets.
Yeah. Instead of framing decisions as all or nothing propositions, we can view them as wagers with varying degrees of confidence.
Interesting. So it's like saying, I'm 80% sure this is the right decision, rather than I know this is the right decision.
Exactly. It forces us to acknowledge the uncertainty inherent in most decisions.
So we're not pretending to have all the answers. We're just making the best bet we can with the information we have.
Precisely. And this shift in thinking can make a big difference in how we approach decision-making.
I can see that. It makes us more humble and less likely to fall into those traps of overconfidence and hindsight bias.
Right. And it also encourages us to be more open to new information and to adjust our beliefs as needed.
This is making a lot of sense.
Yeah. So by embracing uncertainty and thinking in bets, we can start to make more objective and ultimately more successful decisions.
This has been a great start to our deep dive. I'm really intrigued to see where we go from here.
Me too. We've got a lot more to unpack in the next segment.
All right, stay tuned. So we've been talking about how our brains are wired for certainty and how that can sometimes lead to some not so great decisions.
Yeah, like we talked about that whole resulting thing.
Right, where we judge a decision based solely on the outcome.
Exactly, which can be really misleading. because sometimes good decisions lead to bad outcomes, and vice versa.
Right. So how do we start to break free from that pattern?
Well, one thing that Annie Duke suggests in Thinking in Bets is to create a decision swear jar.
A swear jar.
Yeah, you basically identify certain words or phrases that you tend to use when you're falling into those biased thinking patterns.
Oh, I see. So like saying things like, I knew it all along.
Exactly. Or it was obvious that, those kinds of things that show hindsight bias or overconfidence.
Right.
And then every time you catch yourself using one of those phrases, you put $1 in the jar. Or whatever amount works for you.
That's a clever idea. It makes you more aware of those thought patterns.
Exactly. And it can be a fun way to gamify the process of becoming a more mindful decision maker.
I like it.
Yeah. And Duke also talks about the importance of becoming a data sharer.
Data sharer. What's that?
It's about being more transparent and objective when you're discussing decisions with others.
Okay.
So instead of just cherry-picking evidence to support your own viewpoint, you try to share all the relevant information, even the stuff that might contradict your initial assumptions.
So it's about prioritizing truth-seeking over ego protection.
Exactly. It's about being willing to be wrong.
That's hard.
It takes humility, but it's essential for making good decisions.
And this kind of ties into another concept that Duke brings up, the idea of building a truth-seeking pod.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
A group of people who are committed to helping each other see their blind spots.
Oh, right. And make better decisions.
Exactly. But it's important to note that not all groups are created equal.
Oh.
Yeah. There's a big difference between what Duke calls confirmatory groups and exploratory groups.
Okay, I'm listening.
So confirmatory groups are basically echo chambers, where everyone just reinforces each other's existing beliefs.
Like a bunch of yes men.
Right. And those can be dangerous because they can lead to groupthink and really bad decisions.
I see.
But exploratory groups are different. They encourage open-mindedness and dissent.
So it's okay to disagree.
It's more than okay. It's encouraged because it helps the group see things from different angles and avoid those blind spots.
So diversity of thought is key.
Absolutely. The more diverse the perspectives within a group, the more likely they are to make good decisions.
This makes me think about all those times I've been in meetings where everyone just agrees with the boss.
Yeah, it's a common problem. But it can be really detrimental to good decision-making.
So how do we build a truth-seeking pod?
Well, first, you need to find people who are genuinely committed to truth and who are willing to challenge each other.
Okay. So people who aren't afraid to speak their minds.
Exactly. And it's also important to create a culture of psychological safety within the group.
What does that mean?
It means that people feel comfortable sharing their ideas and opinions without fear of judgment or reprisal.
So like a no-blame environment.
Right, exactly. Because if people are afraid to speak up, then you're not going to get that diversity of thought that's so essential for good decision-making.
This is really insightful stuff.
Yeah. And Duke also talks about how we can use mental time travel to improve our decision-making.
Mental time travel.
Yeah, sounds kind of woo-woo. But it's basically just using our imagination to step outside of the present moment and consider different perspectives.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
So one technique she recommends is the 10-10-10 method.
What's that?
You ask yourself, how will I feel about this decision in 10 minutes, in 10 months, and in 10 years?
That's interesting. It forces you to think long-term.
Exactly. Because it's easy to get caught up in the immediate emotions of a decision.
Right. Like if you're really excited about something, you might not think about the potential downsides.
Exactly. Or if you're really scared of something, you might overestimate the risks.
So the 10-10-10 method helps you to get a more balanced perspective.
Precisely. And it can also help you to identify your true priorities.
I like it.
Yeah. And another mental time travel technique that Duke recommends is backcasting.
Backcasting? What's that?
It's basically imagining that you've already achieved your goal and then working backward to figure out the steps you need to take to get there.
So it's like reverse engineering your success.
Exactly. And it can be a really helpful way to create a plan and to identify potential obstacles.
I'm definitely going to try that one out.
Yeah. And Duke also talks about the importance of doing premortems.
Premortems.
Yeah. Which is basically the opposite of backcasting. You imagine that you've failed to achieve your goal, and then you brainstorm all the reasons why that might have happened.
So it's like intentionally thinking about the worst case scenario.
Right. But the goal isn't to scare yourself. It's to identify potential risks and to develop strategies to mitigate them.
I see. So it's like a mental fire drill.
Exactly. It helps you to be more prepared for challenges when they inevitably arise.
This is all really interesting stuff.
Yeah, it's about being proactive and strategic in your decision-making.
Right. instead of just reacting to whatever happens.
Exactly. And Duke also talked about the importance of calibrating our beliefs.
Calibrating our beliefs. What does that mean?
It means treating our beliefs like bets.
Bets.
Yeah. We could be more or less confident in them, and we should be willing to update them as new information comes in.
So it's like saying I'm 70% sure this is true, but I'm open to changing my mind if I see new evidence.
Exactly. And this shift in thinking can make a big difference in how we approach learning and decision-making.
I can see that. It makes us more humble and more adaptable.
Right. Because the world is constantly changing, and we need to be able to change with it.
This has been another fascinating segment. I'm really starting to see how all these ideas from thinking in bets can be applied to real life.
Yeah, it's a really practical book. It's not just theoretical mumbo-jumbo.
Right. It's about making better decisions in a world that's full of uncertainty.
Exactly. And in our final segment, we'll talk about some specific takeaways that you can start using today to improve your own decision-making.
All right, I'm looking forward to it. Okay, so we've been on this deep dive into Annie Duke's Thinking in Bets.
Yeah, exploring all these fascinating ideas about how to make better decisions in a world that's full of uncertainty.
And I think we've covered a lot of ground, right? We've talked about resulting the illusion of control-motivated reasoning.
Mental time travel, truth-seeking pods.
All that good stuff. But now the question is, how do we actually put all of this into practice?
Right. How do we take all this knowledge and turn it into action?
Exactly. So what are some key takeaways that we can start using in our everyday lives?
Well, I think one of the most important things to remember is to start small.
Small.
Yeah, don't try to change everything about your decision-making process overnight.
Right. That sounds overwhelming.
It is. Pick one thing that resonated with you from the book and focus on that.
But like maybe start with that decision swear jar.
Exactly.
Oh.
Or maybe you try incorporating the 10-10-10 method into your next big decision.
Or maybe you challenge yourself to be a more active data sharer in your conversations.
Right. The key is to find what works for you and to be patient with yourself.
Yeah, it's a process, right? It takes time to develop new habits.
It does. And another important takeaway is to focus on the process, not just the outcome.
Yes, that poker analogy.
Exactly. You can't control whether you win or lose every hand.
But you can control how you play the game.
Exactly. And the same goes for life. You can't control every outcome.
Right. But you can control the decisions you make.
And the way you approach those decisions.
So even if a decision doesn't work out the way you hoped, you can still learn from it.
Right. And use that knowledge to make better decisions in the future.
It's all about continuous improvement.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And another thing that Duke emphasizes is the importance of calibrating our beliefs.
Right. Treating our beliefs like bets.
Exactly. Because we're not always right.
No one is.
And we need to be open to changing our minds when we're presented with new evidence.
That's tough for some people.
It is.
Yeah.
But it's essential for growth.
So if you're feeling a little overwhelmed by all this information, here's a simple challenge for you.
Okay, I'm
So
listening.
pick just one of the strategies or techniques we've discussed today and commit to trying it out this week.
I like it. Start small.
Yeah. And just see what happens. See how it impacts your thinking, your decisions, your life.
It's an experiment.
Exactly. And you might be surprised by the results.
I think so too. Because even small changes can make a big difference over time.
And that's really what Thinking in Bets is all about, making those small incremental improvements that lead to big results in the long run.
Well said. So that wraps up our deep dive into Thinking in Bets.
It's been a pleasure exploring this book with you, and I hope our listeners have found it as insightful as I have.
Me too. And remember, folks, it's not about being perfect. It's about being a little bit better each day.
Wise words. Until next time, keep those brains churning.